Hello YouTube, this is the Bucket coming at you today with a unique pistol and a unique piece of history. So this right here is the Colt 1908 that my great-grandfather purchased to shoot with his son, my grandfather, and this is the gun that I learned how to shoot on. And I love semi-automatic pistols, and this is one of the guns that made me fall in love with this with guns as a whole. And as I did research growing up, I learned about different guns, and I learned about the history of firearms, and I came out to find that the Colt 1908 was actually not the original gun. This gun was originally called the Colt 1903 Pocket Hammerless, and it came in 32 ACP. Now, my great-grandfather had bought the 1908, which comes in 380 ACP, but when I found out a little bit about the history of that, I found out there was a gun called the Colt 1908 Vest Pocket Pistol, and I kind of fell in love with that particular gun. And as I became more and more of a historian and more learning about different firearms, I learned about the unique history of John Moses Browning and how he operated as a designer and as a manufacturer. So as you can see with this particular firearm, because it's such a old firearm and in such good shape, I taken care of the finish pretty carefully, and so I'm going to put it out on this rag here. So what John Moses Browning did was, he had some problems with the Winchester company, and he realized he didn't manufacture a lot of firearms in the traditional sense. Him and his father and his brother actually owned a company, but they weren't manufacturing in mass. And so what he did is he would design firearms, and then he would sell the patent rights. And Winchester had a couple of situations where they were buying his patents but then not producing the firearms and just shelving them, and he did not like the fact that the guns that he was designing and making weren't being produced. And so he ended up partnering with Colt, and a couple of different firearms came out. The Colt 1903 was one of them, and he made a deal that Colt could use his patents in the United States, in North America, in England, and in Ireland. And then he partnered with FN, saying FN could use his patents in mainland Europe. And you see a lot of firearms that are very, very similar. So the FN 1903 was a longer gun used for and sold to the Swedish military. The Colt 1903 and 1908 were guns designed for personal protection. That's why they were called pocket pistols. Even though they had hammers, since they were shrouded, they called them hammerless. And the same patents would be used in both countries. So he came out with a Colt, or not the Colt, in 1904, came out with a vest pocket pistol. He'd actually partnered with UMC and had them design a specific cartridge, which we would know to call 25 ACP, a center-fired cartridge that would have the same power as a 22 out of an equal size barrel. And he went to Colt and said, "Colt, I've got this cool gun." And Colt said, "No, we're not interested." So he then went to FN and said, "I've got this cool design for a pistol, and would you be interested in it?" And FN said, "I will gobble that up." Now, that was in 1904. So he got all the patents and everything lined up in 1905. FN started producing this firearm in 1906. So the nomenclature gets kind of confusing. Sometimes these are referred to as FN 1905s. Sometimes these are referred to as FN 1906s. Colt watched what FN was doing and saw that these were selling like hotcakes, and in 1908 they started producing their own. So you will look at the 1906, which is what I'm going to refer to this FN as, and the 1908, and they look almost identical, and you can see that he really just took the same design and shrunk it down. Now, there are some differences. So on mine, this is a very, very, very early model gun. This is serial number 62,990. You can tell this is a Type 1 because it has no safety. When they first came out with them from 1906 to 1909, they had no safeties. You could tell that this one was produced in between 1906 and 1907, because after 1907, this is from 1906 to 1907, the slide legend did not have the depose, meaning the patent had not been issued yet. So my gun is in between 1907 and 1909, because in 1909 they started putting a grip safety, a frame safety here. And most people argue that the safety was less a safety and more a notch to help with disassembly, because with this firearm and this firearm, you'll see disassembly can be kind of difficult. So this fires the 25 ACP. In Europe, it'll be called the 6.35 Browning, and it's a diminutive cartridge. It does have a grip safety, and it holds 6 rounds in this single stack magazine. Again, the only safety that it comes with it is the grip safety. The Type 2s will have a grip safety, and when they get to the Type 3s, they actually put in a magazine disconnect safety. So sometimes you'll hear them referred to as the triple safety. This is the single safety. It only has this one grip safety. And some people get nervous about carrying this with a round in the chamber, and I'll show you why some of them are concerned. This is an absolutely minuscule gun. It is a little bit heavier than what would come out as the baby Browning, ironically enough, not designed by Browning. And this is probably heavier than an LCP2. It's not a light gun, but I do carry this whenever I'm wearing my suit and I have my vest on. I enjoy this gun. It is fun to shoot. I will tell you that the sight radius on this gun is absolutely a joke. I'm trying to get it so you can see how small that pin is. It is a striker fired firearm, and with this particular firearm, you have to look into it, and you can see that there are the 3 lugs there, and you have to line, and the 3 lugs that you see are in the slide, and you have to get those just right lined up to disassemble this firearm. Now, I will show it to you with my Colt 1908. And as you can see, getting this lined up and doing it while I'm looking through my camera is even more difficult. You can see why the safety, which actually gives you a notch, there you go, I got it. You rotate that. You can see why the safety with a notch really helps out. The FN 1903 had a notch to hold the slide in place for disassembly. The Colts do not. The Colt 1908 vest pocket pistol does, but that is a problem on these earlier models. And once you've got that barrel rotated, it comes out, and you will have the barrel, you'll have the slide, you'll have the non-captive recoil spring. And if you look how precarious that striker is on there, that's why a lot of people don't carry these firearms with a round in the chamber. So I can understand why some people would be concerned to do that. But now that I have this gun disassembled, you can kind of see exactly how this works, that it is exact. You have to get it exactly on there to disassemble this firearm, and with no marks on the gun, that can be difficult. Now, I do like European guns because they mark the barrel. You can see the really cool Belgian proof marks. You can see the Belgian proof marks on the slide right here. You can see the Belgian proof marks on the frame right here. They do mark these guns all up. It is a unique situation. On the Colt versions, and I always forget which side they put it on, they do put an arrow here, and you line that up like so, and you kind of have an idea of where to start turning. And I'm going to see if I can do this while I'm on camera. This is really a two-handed affair. And unfortunately, the arrow does not line up perfectly. So you do kind of have to play with it a little bit. Oh, there it is. Then you rotate it. And one of the other things that they did do with the Colts and on the later ones, if you'll notice on the later ones, when they put it in here, first of all, they have it so that the barrel creates a lug if there's cutout to it. And also, if you notice, do you see how there's just this huge trough here? It isn't specifically having to line up with every single lug right here. The lugs all come in and just rotate as one big block. And that does make assembly and disassembly a lot easier. So they did improve some of these things as they went through. I'm not going to reassemble that Colt on camera because I'm going to have enough of a cluster trying to get all this reassembled. It's easier to line up the lugs when you have the gun disassembled. You'll want to put the barrel in from the front. It's different from the Colt. And then I have found that assembling the striker, putting it in the gun, you will want to take the striker out when you disassemble it. It's a lot easier with the striker in the slide than it is with the striker still on the frame. You'll want to put the guide rod and the spring. Then you go ahead and you get the slide starting to go. Get it into the slide. It will be much, much easier. And then we will actually look down and we will see when they're all lined up. And it does take a little bit of practice. This isn't something that you're going to be doing under stress. This is definitely going to be something that you do when you take home after you've shot it a few times or it's been in your vest. And we're going to see if we can get that lined up just right. And this is under spring tension, so it can be a little bit tricky. There we go. And then it'll rotate into place. Once it's in place, you are ready to go. Again, all these things are very similar to the 1908. I will tell you that in the later iterations of the 1908, they had a very similar cutout in the slide, which made assembly a little bit easier. They also had a safety, which they had a notch in, where if you push the notch down or safety into the notch, it would hold it into place, and that would be right where you needed to twist the barrel. Huge improvement over the original design. What makes these FNs so difficult, because they made 1 million of these, over 1 million. Some of the records say 1,030,000. Some records say 1,300,000. What makes this so unique is I'm here in America, these guns were not allowed to be imported. And really, FN didn't want to import them. There was Colt 1908s. There was no reason to pay the import fees and whatnot. So these FNs, they're very, very hard to find here in the States. Because primarily, there's only 3 ways that these could get here. One, the least likely, is an American citizen traveling in Europe, saw one of these in the shelves, picked one up, and then smuggled it back or brought it back in. That's less likely because, again, these things Colt 1908s were very easily found here in the States. Second, it could have been bought by a European citizen that then immigrated to the U.S. A little bit less likely. Chances are what ended up happening is either in World War I or World War II, these were either traded for or were war prizes. That's probably how this particular firearm ended up in the United States, making these pretty rare to find in the United States. They do have horn grips. They are very good and reliable shooters, and they're just a lot of fun. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this to the range, tell you about how she shoots, tell you about how accurate she is, tell you about what I really think the usefulness of this particular firearm is. And I'm just so excited that I get to bring this to you guys because it's something you're not going to see at a lot of shows. You'll see a lot of the Spanish knockoff ones, and that's actually why they moved to the baby Browning from this particular design. This was the design that the Ruby was basically a knockoff of. So they made a lot of these in Spain. You see a lot of the knockoff versions. You see very few of the FNs. You'll see a fair amount of the Colt 1908 ones. But these FNs are pretty rare, so I'm excited to get to show it to you and tell you the history about it. Again, I want to thank you guys so much for supporting this channel. The likes are really appreciated. The comments are really appreciated. And any shares would be appreciated as well. And you stay classy, YouTube. Little baby bucket, do you want to live in California?
No.
Why?
Because I'm not a compliment.